July, and welcome to our afternoon edition of Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-woo, and it's good to have you with us. The US State Department has reiterated that it won't be providing a timeline for the denuclearization of North Korea. This statement comes ahead of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang later this week to hash out the details of North Korea's denuclearization process. If there is no timeline, then North Korea watchers will be waiting to see what Pompeo will come back with from those talks. In the meantime, South Korea continues to step up its relations with North Korea, with the first day of inter-Korean basketball games taking place in Pyongyang today. We'll break down these latest developments with an expert in the studio later, but first we catch up on the latest headlines with Devin Whiting at the News Center. Devin?
Hi, Jung-ho. That's right. South and North Korea are playing basketball today. These friendly games were scheduled to have begun just a little while ago in Pyongyang at 3:40 p.m. local time at Il-guk Gymnasium. There will be 4 games in total over the next 2 days, 2 matches each on Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday's games will be between teams where South and North Korean players are mixed together, and in Thursday's games, the 2 Koreas will compete against each other. They'll be divided by color only, one in red and the other in blue. It's been agreed that national flags or anthems will not be used. This is the 4th round of inter-Korean basketball games, the last one having been held 15 years ago. When the South Korean delegation arrived in the north yesterday, they were treated to dinner at a famous Pyongyang restaurant. Their host, the North Korean sports minister, said these basketball friendlies will help the 2 countries in their aim of reunification. Oh Jung-hee has more.
The South Koreans visiting Pyongyang for the upcoming inter-Korean basketball games were greeted with a warm welcome from the get-go. On Tuesday evening, a welcoming dinner was held at Ongryugwan, a restaurant in Pyongyang famous for its cold noodles. In the case of the South Korean art troup's visit to Pyongyang in April, the dinner event did not happen on the first day, but on the last day. Seoul's Unification Minister Cho Myung-gyun and a few other government officials, plus the South Korean basketball players, were invited. North Korea's Sports Minister Kim Il-guk was present with his Vice Minister, the Vice Head of Pyongyang's Inter-Korean Affairs Committee, and the North's basketball players. The guests were treated to a traditional Korean course meal with Pyongyang-style cold noodles at the end.
We deliver warm, brotherly love from our athletes and the citizens of Pyongyang. In February and April, artists from the north and the south made exchange visits and showed that our people are inextricably one. Today's unification basketball games will further boost our yearning for unification.
It's been 15 years, and I know some of our South and North Korean coaches actually played in the last basketball games back in 2003. They'll be impressed more than anyone here. The athletes who will be playing together for the first time will be touched as well. The fact South and North Korea are together means a lot more than who wins or loses.
Over 100 South Koreans arrived in the North Korean capital earlier on Tuesday for the inter-Korean basketball games, which were agreed upon at sports talks in June. It's believed Seoul's unification minister will meet with various senior figures in Pyongyang and possibly leader Kim Jong-un as well. But it's unclear whether Kim, who's known for his love of basketball, will watch the games himself. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
The 2 Koreas today are also continuing their talks on joint projects in forestry. Those talks began at around 10 a.m. Korea time at the Peace House located on the South Korean side of the border village of Panmunjom. South Korea's lead delegate, the deputy head of the Forest Service, began by remarking that it's fortunate that the typhoon currently near the Korean peninsula has changed course and likely won't hit the Korean mainland. He emphasized the importance of having healthy forests when disaster strikes.
Known that water and forestry are very closely related, South Korea sympathizes with the North on the importance of forest restoration in order to prevent disasters.
Vice Minister Yu also said that there's a high level of interest in the issue in the South and that he hopes the meeting produces great results. The North Korean delegation, too, expressed their hopes for holding a successful discussion. The 2 sides are also expected to talk about holding joint studies on forests in the north, as well as tree nurseries and related technology. Now, those forestry projects could be pretty far-reaching. The North has decimated its forests over the years, so there's a lot of work to be done. In the first part of a two-part series, our Shin Se-min takes a closer look at these joint efforts to make both Koreas greener.
It marks the comeback of a once jointly run project between the two Koreas. The two sides once held hands on joint forestry projects in the late 1990s. But those projects were put on the back burner in 2010 when tensions spiked following a series of military provocations by North Korea. However, with the cloud of tensions and threats being lifted, just like many other joint initiatives now being set up by Seoul and Pyongyang, this one may end up being a long-term project between the two. However, both sides are realistic, considering the reality of North Korea's circumstances. Some 2.8 million hectares of forest had been cut down in North Korea as of 2008, and that's nearly double the amount of bare land compared to just a decade earlier. It's so bad that a UK-based risk consulting company assessed North Korea's deforestation as the third worst in the world in 2012.
Precisely understanding the situation in North Korea is the most crucial first step. It's necessary if the two sides are going to be able to make a difference. However, we believe it will be different this time due to Pyongyang's determination.
That determination reflected in its leader Kim Jong-un's efforts to restore a semblance of environmental care in his country, announcing plan to plant 6.5 billion trees by 2023 and even opening up a forestry science school at the elite Kim Il-sung University in Pyongyang. The forestry project between the two Koreas, although still very much in its infancy, could branch out in a number of ways. Comprehensive projects related to forest and agriculture already seem to be coming down the pipeline. Related businesses' stock prices have shot up over the past couple of weeks, especially those involved in forest restoration, cultivating saplings, mineral exploration, and seed production.
We're looking to start with cabbage, corn, broccoli, and radish. Crops like these bring about quick benefits, especially with some of them being native to our soil. They are most suitable when we consider the environmental circumstances.
The sentiment this time is more positive, with North Korea showing a strong inclination to follow through on its pledges. Environmentalists here in South Korea have one thing in mind: improving this fertile land bestowed to us by our ancestors and adding a lot more greenery along the way. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
There have been concerns that South Korea's economic growth has been slowing down recently with a sudden drop in exports last month. But some good news for the economy is that Korea's foreign exchange reserves have hit a new record. Oh Soo-young has the details.
South Korea's foreign exchange reserves topped $400 billion for the first time in June, bolstering the country's financial stability. The Bank of Korea said Wednesday the country's reserves grew $1.3 billion from the previous month to $400.3 billion. The record-breaking figure comes more than 7 years after the country's foreign reserves passed the $300 billion threshold in 2011. It is also 100 times larger than the reserves of just $4 billion back in 1997 during the Asian financial crisis. A bank official said the recent surge was largely due to a steady current account surplus and also cited constant gains in assets held in foreign currencies. Securities holdings alone reached $367 billion, up by $1.56 billion on month. Amid concerns of a downturn in exports, consumption and investment, experts say the country's burgeoning foreign reserves are an encouraging sign of financial resilience, as they translate to a growing ability to service foreign debt. South Korea's short-term external debt in 1997 was roughly 3 times its foreign exchange reserves. The ratio came to 75% during the global financial crisis and fell to just 30.4% in March this year. At the end of May, South Korea came in 9th place in the global ranking of foreign reserves, which was topped by China, Japan and Switzerland. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
Many eyes have been on how long it would take North Korea to denuclearize, with some senior US officials saying it could be done in 1 year. But while Washington's top diplomat Mike Pompeo is set to head to North Korea on Tuesday for follow-up nuclear talks, the US State Department has once again clarified that there is currently no timeline for North Korea's denuclearization. EG1 reports.
The U.S. continues to say it'll not put a timeline on North Korea's denuclearization. Speaking at a press briefing on Tuesday, State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said she was aware of the timeline given by some individuals, but simply said the U.S. government will not be providing one. Those comments would appear to be in line with what Secretary Mike Pompeo told CNN last week, that there would be no timeline, but Washington would continue to monitor the North's progress. Those who have said there's a timeline include National Security Advisor John Bolton, who said in a TV interview last weekend that it would be possible for the U.S. to dismantle the North's weapons programs within a year. In terms of expectations for Pompeo's third visit to Pyongyang that's set to start later this week, Nauert said they will be continuing talks on following up on the joint statement signed at the June 12 summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Singapore. She said former nuclear negotiator and the U.S. ambassador to the Philippines, Sung Kim, had a good series of meetings with his North Korean counterpart in planning Pompeo's visit. She added the U.S. has been very clear in terms of its expectations, which remain unchanged from the Singapore summit. And compared to just last year, Nauert said significant progress has been made.
We're at a good spot today. The Secretary is looking forward to having meetings with his North Korean counterparts. And we go into this eyes wide open, but nevertheless, we've made a lot of progress in the past year.
While the exact calculations have not yet been done, Nauert said the U.S. delegation will be spending a good bit of time in Pyongyang, with at least a day and a half of meetings planned. Progress with Pyongyang was also reaffirmed by President Trump. He tweeted on Tuesday that talks with North Korea were going well, adding that there have been no rocket launches or nuclear tests for 8 months. While slamming the Democrats and what he calls the fake news media for their complaints, Trump said that if it weren't for him, the U.S. would now be at war with the North. The tweet caused a stir at the White House on Tuesday, with Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders being quizzed on whether America's goal had changed from denuclearizing Pyongyang to avoiding war. Sanders insisted the goal remains the same as it has always been, denuclearization, adding the U.S. will continue pushing for that and working closely with North Korea. 이지원, Arirang News.
Now, joining us in the studio today to discuss the North Korea denuclearization issue, we have with us Dr. Ko Myung-hyun, a research fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Ko, thank you for coming in again.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now, let's go over some of the things I just said in that last report again. So the US State Department spokesperson said, we're not going to provide a timeline for the denuclearization process for North Korea. Now, that does seem to come in stark contrast to what National Security Advisor John Bolton said over the weekend, who said that the US is ready to denuclearize, dismantle North Korea's nuclear program in 1 year if North Korea cooperates.
That's right.
What should we make of these two statements?
Well, it sounds like on the surface that John Bolton, National Security Advisor, is undermining Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. But I think that could be the case. Or also it could be that Mike Pompeo and John Bolton are playing this good cop, bad cop game on North Korea. But I think the net effect on North Korea will be this, regardless of what's really going on behind the scenes, is that from the North Korean's point of view, from their perspective, the U.S. is asking North Korea to dismantle its nuclear program. There's no timeline about it, but it doesn't mean that there's no timeline. It means that the United States can be flexible about the dismantlement process. It doesn't mean that there's no deadline. I think that's the message that U.S. sending to North Korea at this moment.
I mean, that's what I want to talk about. So if there is no timeline, what can they come back with? There must be some sort of timeline, because there needs to be steps made by North Korea to show that they are doing some sort of denuclearization process. Do we have to trust North Korea to come up with their own timeline?
Well, that was pretty much the message that came out of the Singapore summit. I mean, President Trump said himself that there's no timeline, and also that it sounded like President Trump believed that Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, would take voluntary steps towards denuclearization. And every time North Korea takes a step towards denuclearization, that'll be evaluated by the United States government and then reciprocated in a way that could be amenable to North Korean interest. So then I think this is very much of a contingent kind of a process. So instead of having a very clear roadmap towards denuclearization, what it says is that both sides are going to take step-by-step approach, and each step they're going to agree or disagree whether this has to be significant or not, then proceed to the next stage. So this is a more flexible approach, but on the other hand, it leaves so much to interpretation that could lead to some sort of a breakdown in the process too. So I think the U.S. government is engaging in a lot of risks right now, but then at the same time, it's putting pressure on North Korea by saying that this is the only game in town, and if you don't play this game, there'll be no more chance. I think that's the message that President Trump is trying to send.
Perhaps muddying the waters further at the moment is the statement, this phrase that has emerged over North Korea's denuclearization process over the last few days. The State Department said very recently that the goal remains the final fully verified denuclearization of North Korea, which has been dubbed by the media FFVD.
That's right.
That comes in contrast to what they've said before, which is CVID, the complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of North Korea. What do we make of this new phrase? Is it just an accident that a spokesperson said just came out a bit wrong, or is it signal a different change in direction from the White House?
No, I doubt it. I think it's re-emphasizing the U.S. government's commitment to CVID. I mean, if you really go into the semantics of each term here, fully and then final, I think they're connected to a complete and irreversible in this case. So it's just essentially like rephrasing the same terminology again, so that you could, I mean, in a way to increase to emphasize again what the key points are in this case, which is like complete and irreversible. So I think that's what the spokesperson is trying to send as a message to North Korea and the domestic audience.
So you're saying there's no difference between CVID and FFVD as such, because some were saying CVID was unrealistic in the first place anyway. Maybe FFVD provides some sort of wiggle room, some sort of space that could be interpreted differently.
Well, I mean, I guess you're right. I mean, it could be, I mean, I think about you have to be quite creative about finding a space in FFVD, I guess. So I think that it will be quite difficult to find a space like that here because you know, like if you look at the semantics of each term, the new terms that came up, it actually very closely connected to complete and irreversible, in my view. But then, in addition to that, I think Secretary Pompeo himself has come up with a different variation of CVID before. He called it PVID, like a permanent, verifiable, and irreversible dismantlement. So this is another iteration of like a tendency like that on rephrasing CVID.
So we shouldn't look too far into the details, you're saying. Maybe the Trump administration themselves perhaps aren't that hung up on the details, so maybe we shouldn't either?
That's exactly correct. And at the same time, we have to remember that there are only two definitions of denuclearization at this moment. One is the one by North Korea, which is the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, which means that only the denuclearization process not only pertains to North Korea, but also includes South Korea. And that's one. And then on the other hand, we have CVID or FFVD or PVID. So there are many variations like that, but they are all the same at the end of the day.
So you don't think North Korea would be perhaps more amenable to FFVD rather than CVID, which we know that they haven't been particularly willing to go along with either? I
think at the end of the day, what North Korea wants is not so much in the what are the letters the CVID is composed of, but I think they are interested in dropping some of the letters from CVID. For instance, they would like to drop V, verifiable, and I, irreversible. And that's the reason why they keep talking about complete denuclearization without V and I. So I think that's what the North Koreans would like to hear from the United States, but they're not hearing that right now.
Okay, let's move on to some other developments that are happening over the last couple of days. A South Korean delegation is in North Korea right now, playing some inter-Korean basketball games at the moment. So North Korean media, which was quite interesting, they've reported on it very quickly, and it seems to have quite a positive kind of atmosphere about its reporting. What do you make of these inter-Korean basketball games so far? So
this is very interesting because I think we are going through different phases of inter-Korean dialogue, and each phase is characterized by a theme. Last year, the theme, or the thematic was actually actually concert, singing. So last year we sent singers, and then they sent, North Korea sent singers back here in Seoul, so stage concerts. So that happened to be the stage of inter-Korean dialogue throughout early this year. Now we're talking about sports. So I think in that sense, it's the same thing that is going on before. In a way, this is another instrument, I would say, for both Koreas to expand the level of the inter-Korean dialogue.
As we all know, Kim Jong-un is a very big fan of basketball. Do you think he'll make an appearance at these games itself?
Well, he did appear on the South Korean concert earlier this year, so I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up again for the basketball match.
Do you think there'll be any significance, like for the fact that he is legitimizing these kind of games by turning up?
Well, I mean, the fact that it's going to be broadcast by the official North Korean TV is going to be a way to legitimize the whole encounter. But if Kim Jong-un himself shows up and is seen on the North Korean TV congratulating or talking to South Korean and North Korean players, is going to add another dimension to this encounter. So it's going to, from the North Koreans' point of view, it's going to be historic.
There are some reports saying that it might be broadcast live. That's probably very unlikely, right?
That could be possible. I mean, it really depends on what's the plan that the North Koreans have in mind. But I think that there could be some difficulties with broadcasting live because the presence of mixed race players on the South Korean squad. And I mean, we know that the North Korean society is very rigid and then very nationalistic and even chauvinistic in many ways. And for the North Korean public to see mixed race South Korean players playing for South Korea could come across as a cultural shock. So if the North Korean state is worried about such impact on the North Korean population, they could decide not to broadcast it live and come out with an edited version later.
There's been another round of inter-Korean talks happening today in Korea that took place in Panmunjom, and this time it's a cooperation over forestry projects. We've seen rail and road projects discussions before, but now it's going over to forestry. Can you explain to our viewers a little bit about why forestry and what the two sides are looking to achieve in these talks?
Well, forestry is quite important for North Korea right now because there are for environmental reasons, but also for agricultural reasons. North Korea has been suffering from low agricultural productivity because of soil erosion. And soil erosion happened because North Koreans don't have access to ready source of energy, so they've been cutting down trees to supplement their energy basket. So that led to deforestation, which in turn led to soil erosion, which also increased the chance of major flooding happening, which actually did happen, the latest one being the one in 2016. So reforestation of North Korean mountains is actually very important for North Korea, obviously, but also from South Korea's perspective. If you look at the different dialogue that's going on between the two Koreas right now, such as connecting the two Koreas by railroad and reforestation and plus additional things, they're all actually being bringing focus to developing the infrastructure in North Korea. These are the very basic stuff that North Korea needs to jumpstart its economy.
Is there any risk of violating international sanctions? Because there has been a concern with the roads and rail negotiations that have happened over the last week. With forestation, is there perhaps more leeway to find some sort of way to cooperate without violating those UN sanctions which are imposed on North Korea right now?
So there are different ways to see this, but then the most important clause that we have to look into in this case is a catch-all clause that's included in the UN sanctions Security Council Resolution 2270. There's a catch-all clause there that states that anything that benefits the operational capability of the North Korean military is banned from taking place. So if they are, clearly connecting the railroad improving the railroad system in North Korea could be in violation of sanctions, but then reforestation could actually fall under the category of humanitarian assistance, especially if we are only talking about lending technical assistance without providing them with materials, especially the construction materials. Then if we limit the scope of our cooperation with North Korea in a reforestation project, then I think it's going to be basically be free from this kind of scrutiny from the international community.
Interesting. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for coming in as usual and sharing your insights with us.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for staying with us. I'll be back tomorrow with more of our experts' take on the day's top stories. Hope you can join us again then, and goodbye for now.
우리 도로라는 게 아까도 말씀드렸지만 불편하십니다. 내가 오늘 내려와 봐서 아는데 그렇기 때문에
내가 뭐야 넌 말해 난 갖고 노는 거야